the border princes. Corentin Varro had heard many shocking tales of this wretched place, a realm of robber barons and beggar knights, a land plagued by warring tribes of orcs and roving beast herds. Ruled, if such a disunited clutch of fiefdoms could ever truly be ruled, by an ever-shifting patchwork of exiled lords and vagabond kings, it was a realm of lawlessness and petty squabbling under the constant shadow of war. The maps that deigned to mark it at all depicted it as a dismal, rain-soaked peninsula beyond the southern edges of the Empire and Britannia, bordered on three sides by soaring mountains, as vast and pitiless as it was possible to imagine, and the treacherous waters of the Black Gulf. Here folk of low character washed up like flotsam on a stony beach. The troubadours of Quenelles regaled the tavern folk with lurid songs of honourless miscreants such as Cécile Gaston, Deza Donalba, the Bloody Baron, and the murderous Maid of Moussillon. Yes, Varro had heard all the tales and songs, believing them darkly and comically exaggerated to titillate their peasant listeners. But now that he beheld the land of the border princes for himself, he saw the songs had, if anything, underplayed its sullen wretchedness. 53 days it had taken the army of Lord Syricus Carrard to reach Cassos Rock, 100 knights in riotous panoply, 500 peasant yeomen, and twice that number of drovers, motley fools, wagoners and beasts of burden brought along to supply them. From the exuberant knights errant in the vanguard to the more seasoned warriors of the rearguard, the column trailed nearly a mile, a snaking line of soldiers on the march. It had been a brutal crossing, and Varro still didn't know for sure why they had made it. 3 months ago, a warrior clad in black warplate had arrived at the gates of Quenelles, bearing a letter sealed with blue wax and stamped with a dragon sigil, declaring that his orders were to hand it to the Duke himself. As knight equerry to Lord Carrard, Varro had escorted the man to the Duke's chambers, ready to put a sword through his heart if he proved false. The contents of the letter, however, remained a mystery, for Lord Carrard had cast it into the hearth fire and dismissed the warrior as soon as he'd read it. With the man gone, the Duke gave the order to summon the knights of his dukedom to Quenelles and oath themselves to a new quest under the unicorn banner. No sooner had that order been dispatched than the Duke dictated a letter to be sent to none other than King Lewin Leoncoeur, the orc slayer himself. With every word Varro wrote, his amazement grew, for Lord Carrard was regretfully informing his liege lord that he could not rejoin the errantry war, that a matter of honour required him to ride to his cousin's aid in the border princes. Varro had served Lord Carrard for 3 years, ever since Varro had saved his life at Talbot's Vale, and taken the knightly vow on a battlefield knee-deep in orc corpses. But instead of then granting Varro his own lands and the right to raise a castle, as was customary, Lord Carrard had appointed him to the role of his knight equerry. Instead of building his own lands, he was tasked with running the Duke's citadel in Quenelles, managing the health of his stables and the organisation of his household, and dealing with his lord's many correspondences. An honourable posting, to be sure, one that taught Varro that being a Lord Knight of Britannia involved so much more than prowess with lance, sword, and axe. But 3 years was a long time to wait to forge his own legacy, long enough to earn him a derisory nickname, the Knight of Quills, long enough for Varro to grow weary of penning letters, balancing ledgers, and collecting few duties from the Duke's tenant farmers. This quest was the perfect opportunity to again prove his worth as a warrior deserving of his own lands, a chance to step from Lord Carrard's shadow and become master of his own fate. 7 days after the messenger's arrival, an army of knights, peasants and pilgrims began the long march over the vaults along narrow roads made almost impassable by winter's closing fist. The blessings of Lady Rosamond kept the worst of the elements at bay, but still many horses and men had perished in the worsening blizzards as they climbed higher into the mountains. Deep in the jagged peaks they saw many hideous cairns of skulls and grotesque bone totems, and endured attacks from spiteful goblin arrows that troubled the knights not at all, but slew dozens among the peasant host. All in all, they suffered 2 months of hardship, sporadic fighting, and privation before emerging into the wide, rain-soaked highlands of the border princes. At the mouth of the old dwarf pass, Lady Severine's Pegasus knights came upon the warrior who'd brought the dragon-sealed letter to Quenelles. The man had been strung up on a triangular gibbet and stripped of flesh. Only his face had been left untouched, frozen in a mask of agony. The ground was too hard to dig, so the peasant labourers fashioned a pyre from his gibbet as the handmaidens of the lady said prayers of mercy to guide him to the garden of Moor. Then, descending to the dark forest lands and sodden plains, they marched past muddy farms and stockaded hill forts on rutted tracks, where the eyes of hooded and suspicious peasants followed them as they passed south. And now, as the sun dipped to the west on the 53rd day of their long march, the host had their first look at the headland of Casos Rock. Lord Carrard lifted his helm's visor and surveyed his cousin's demesne with a disdainful eye, but it was left to Bastian, the brash and haughty cavalier of the knights errant, to fully express the feelings of the gathered army. "What a shithole,"